It's amazing what's going on in my America. I want my country back, and I'm not giving up. We got to get it. Bill Lockwood is here. It's the last Tuesday of the month, and Bill is here. Most of you know, the last Tuesday of every month. Bill Lockwood, writer and radio host at American Liberty with Bill Lockwood, teacher in Wichita Falls, Texas, and preacher at Our Park Church of Christ. And I wanted to talk to Bill about America, about Independence Day and how the children of the lie, the evil people, are trying to destroy it. Bill, good morning. Welcome back.
Good morning, Jesse. How are you today? Good to be with you.
You too, man. All is well. Thank you. And by the way, folks, Bill is one of the smartest white men on this side of heaven, and he's not afraid. Bill, I'm looking at the country and the children of the lie, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, the Rhino, the Neville Trumpers and others. Our government is trying to turn it upside down. And I don't know if you remember, but July is not only Independence Day, the 4th of July, but White History Month as well. We started White History Month 4 years ago. And so this coming, 3 years ago, this month, starting Thursday, will be our 4th year. And now they are trying to replace it with something dumb called Juneteenth or something like that, right? Some black day. And apparently a few black people found out 2 years later that slavery had ended.
Right.
And so now they're trying to come up with this fake holiday of June, something called Juneteenth. 2 years later, not when slavery ended, but 2 years later when 5 people found out it had ended. They making that into a holiday. It's like if you miss your flight, you think your flight leave at 1. You think your flight leave at 1, and you show up, you got 5 people waiting because they're thinking it's 1 o'clock, the flight, and they left at 12. Right. And so when those 5 people find out that, oh, the flight left at 12, and they're like, oh, I thought it left at 1, and they would turn 1 into a holiday.
Yeah.
What do you think about Independence Day and then trying to replace it with evil stuff?
Well, you know what, we have, I guess the political elite in America have tried to turn our country into what it is not. And one way to do that is to erase its history, to forget its history, and to create something else, to create a narrative on some other line. And that's exactly what they've tried to do on all different fronts. So not simply July 4th, but, you know, Washington's birthday, just completely put out of the calendar. Men that were so influential in the founding of this country, and we have just absolutely cut ourselves off from history. And it's so important that people realize that history is so critical and understanding our history in order that we might be able to know how to go forward, because the left always tries to manipulate what history really is. If you think about it, just how history has been mistaught so much. We see the 1619 Project, for example, the absolute blatant lies that are taught in the 1619 Project. Why is that done? Well, it's done in order, number one, to cut people off from real history for an understanding of what we're about. At the same time, to create unrest in a people, to make them so angry about things. And so history is important. And so as long as the left is in charge, they're going to try to rewrite history and make it what it is really not. And that's exactly what's happening.
Why isn't there a real pushback from that? I mean, why don't real, true Americans fight against it?
Well, I think in my view, Jesse, it's the same thing that takes place in churches, you know, that there are just a select few that really understand what our business should be and what we should be about as far as worshiping God on a consistent basis, you know, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, that we would continually teach our children diligently in the way that they should go, as the Old Testament puts it, when they lie down when they rise up, when you walk by the way, when you sit in the house, write them for a sign upon the doorpost of the house and on the gates. All of these things, that, in other words, we're to teach diligently and consistently and continually regarding the fear of the Lord. But a lot of people in churches become so lackadaisical, so slothful, that they have drive-through churches now. So if you want to take communion, you just kind of drive through and grab it out of the window, and really kind of defeats the purpose of the whole thing. And so I think the same thing is taking place in America. And that is, people are so involved in themselves, their entertainment, what they like, what they don't want to do. And so pretty soon, we are not as diligent to really study the issues and to defend the issues, and we just let things go, que sera, sera. And so until it's too late, frequently, and that's sad.
Yeah. I was thinking of how they allowed the blacks to tear down the statues and monuments of the great people who founded and created this country and replace it with a black, unemployed thug, drug addict who was unemployed, drug addict with a criminal record, George Floyd. So they take down the noblemen's statues and monuments and replace it with a black thug. Right. How did that happen? I don't know why anyone would agree with that. It's just so evil and wrong. I don't even know. The blacks are worse than what I think, right? Because how would anyone agree with something like that?
Well, that's a good point, Jesse. That is such a tragedy that people would celebrate George Floyd. No one's saying that he should have been killed necessarily, but it's far different from celebrating a man who was on the wrong side of the law, who was indeed a drug addict and a thug, and who is not what he should be as a father and a man, and certainly not a Christian, and certainly not someone who had characters that we should follow, and yet make him some icon for our country. That is absolutely the most absurd thing I've ever heard.
It's like taking down the monuments that have Bible quotations on them and things like that, and replace it with Satan horns or something. Yeah, I never thought I'll see the day that a Judeo-Christian country would allow something like that to happen. We all know that George Floyd is dead because of George Floyd. He didn't care about his own life. He was a drug addict. He had a criminal record. He was a thug. He was not caring about his own life. It looked like there would be all kinds of people protesting that, saying no to it, but it's quiet. No one's really saying anything about it. And if we allow things like that to continue to happen, this fake idea of the 1619 Project, June 10th and all that, if we continue to allow the evil people to do this, there's no stopping. At what point? Oh, I wanted to ask you, will we get to a point where there's no turnaround, and that's what's going to happen?
I believe so. Just like in your Bible question, does history repeat itself? Well, apparently it does. I mean, we're going the way of Israel is what we're doing. And finally, God's told Israel, remember, he said, no, that's it. You're done. And Josiah came to the throne, and he wanted, remember in 2 Kings, he wanted, and he discovered, by the way, goes back to your original question. When the priests, Hilkiah and others, were cleaning out the temple, they discovered a copy of the law, and they brought it to him. The law had been neglected. Here's the law of God had been neglected all this time. And kings that had been wicked were before him, and they found a copy of it in the temple. They brought it to Josiah, and they read it to him. He tore his clothes and lamented that we have forgotten God, and we have forgotten, and we have neglected what the law has to teach. So they initiated a reformation in the land of Judah. But God had told Josiah, he said, he appreciated all those efforts, but he told him, he says, no, that it's already done. He says, I'm taking you out of the way because you'll not have to live to see the demise of your people. And so he died in battle in the valley of Megiddo. But be that as it may, the point is, God had already pulled the plug on Israel. He said, that's it. And they have evolved to a certain point. And you think about it, how America, by the way, did God do in the Old Testament as far as destroying nations? For what causes did God pull the plug, as we say, on nations? Homosexuality, passing their children through the fire, which would be child sacrifice, abortion, and idolatry. Those are the areas in which God allowed nations to collapse and hasten their demise. We have practiced all three in America with the help of certain politicians.
Yeah.
And so we homosexuality, ingrained it in our culture. Number one, we practiced abortion, which is the same thing as passing the children through the fire, offering them to the god Moloch. And we've also practiced idolatry in America, in which we have forsaken God and we're worshiping all kinds of idols, whether it be the Hindu gods or whether it be New Age religion, whatever it may be. We're there. So I do believe that history does repeat itself, and we're in a sad situation.
So what will happen to the Christians if we continue down this road? How would they survive in all this mess? Because Christianity is truly hated, and
yes.
they're doing all they can to totally erase it. No other religion that I can see is attacked more than Christianity. And
Right.
so would the Christians really have to find a rock and hide behind it?
Well, that's right. Just like Jesus said regarding the destruction of Jerusalem, they'll be saying, the hills fall on us and the mountains cover us, because, it's going to be very, very sad for Christian people. Maybe, and what you said right there, Jesse, was really, really good. And that is, Christianity is the most hated thing. They have such a thing as Islamophobe. You can have Islamophobia, you can be homophobia, and you can be all these. You can be a phobe to all these different things, but you don't ever hear about being a Christophobe or a bibliophobe, do you?
No, not at all.
I've never heard anybody say, okay, you're a bibliophobe. You're afraid to talk about the Bible. You're afraid of the Bible. You're afraid of Jesus Christ. You're a Christophobe. You don't hear that. See, that's because that's the only religion, Christianity, that is loved to be hated.
Yeah, that's right. This so-called critical race theory, is that being taught in your school?
No, not to my knowledge. It's not being taught at my school. I'm not aware of it if it is, but at any rate, it's all around the country, but not to my knowledge.
And I have been hearing about this off and on over the last 31 years, but I had no idea how evil it is and that it will really come to pass in America. Outwardly teaching non-white children and white children that white people are racist, meaning evil, simply because they are white. What's wrong with white people that they will sacrifice their children to these schools, knowing that that's going? It's not like it's a surprise anymore, right? They know that their children are being taught that, but they get up every morning, get breakfast, and send their kids off to hell. What do they expect to happen?
That's exactly right. And the public schools, the government schools, are actually just a big cesspool of filth any longer. You have, whether it be the sex, the drugs, the out of control behavior that continues to plague the schools, the violence, all of that continues. Added to that, the curricula that is taught in many schools actually teaches people to hate themselves, to hate the race, and America's wrong, America's sinful. We stole land from the Indians. We did this. We've taken the black people's freedoms, and they don't even mention this. This is an interesting fact. They don't even mention the fact that the black slaves came to America because of Islam.
Yeah.
Islamic slave traders. They didn't even originate to come to America except for Islamic slave traders, and Islam teaches slavery in the Quran today.
Yeah.
And they practice it around the world, but you don't ever hear anything about that. I'd like for Ilhan Omar to address, I'd like to just debate Ilhan Omar on what the Quran teaches and what Muhammad practiced on slavery.
That's right.
That alone, but they don't even talk about that.
And not only do they not talk about it, there's no real pushback on it, you know, against the people who are supposed to be on the right side. There's no real pushback. I had no idea that white people, and not all, but most, are so afraid. I understand the women may be nervous to go out there, and that's proper, but I didn't know white men were so afraid that not only will they not stand up for their country, they won't stand up for their children, their family. They won't protect their wives and children from all this. What happened to the white man?
I don't know, Jesse. It's very, very sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we've been emasculated, really, and that's what's happened. That's what's happened across the board in our culture. You know, that we've just lost any kind of backbone, and it's very, very sad to see. I'm not sure as to why, but it's a mass psychology. Just, you know, and people think, well, how could that possibly be that would be so in such mass numbers? Well, think about how the socialist Nazis in Germany, how they brainwashed an entire generation of people.
Yeah.
The Charles Darwins of the world, you know, who gave a lot of fire to Adolf Hitler.
Yes.
You know, and actually taught that, you know, that blacks were inferior peoples. And by the way, Charles Darwin himself taught that blacks are inferior people and they were lower on the chain of evolution than whites and Europeans. And yet Charles Darwin is upheld in our schools in evolution as some great hero.
Yeah.
You can't, this is absolutely remarkable that this is the way it goes.
It's amazing to me that, you know, you just mentioned Charles Darwin. It looked like Charles might be right about the blacks because I noticed that.
Well, he would say that.
But if you really, really pay attention and honest with oneself, black people are leading the way to destruction. Whatever you want to bring destruction upon this earth, they use the blacks in the forefront of it. And they call it racist, and they call it slavery, and they call it all that. And I noticed that the abortion people use the blacks, homosexuals use them. They're cutting off body parts now and putting on fake body parts, putting women body parts on men, boys, and men body parts on girls and women. They use the blacks to promote it, and the blacks are right in the forefront, happy to do it. So do you think Charles Darwin may have been right about the blacks?
Well, no, I don't think he was right about the blacks. You know, what's happened to the black community, however, is at least in America, and that is socialism. Socialism has destroyed the black family and government intrusion. So here's another example. You think about the Indians, the Native Americans. They were put on reservations, and they have they're complete government reservations where the government gives them everything they have. And we do this supposedly out of reparations for the land that they used to live on. And so what's happened, however, the complete government total control and so much infusion of government money, the reservation is the worst place to live for suicide, for drug use, for marital infidelity, and you name it. That's the worst place to be. For joblessness, for crime, it's the worst. Well, why? Because the government creates problems. It does not solve problems. And our founding fathers knew that. That's why America was great to begin with. Our founders recognized that government actually creates problems. It's a necessary thing to have government simply, but only for a very few select things that we cannot do for ourselves, such as protection of a community, protection of a state, or to have a unified monetary system or national defense. Those are the only things that's necessary for a government. But other than that, when the government gets involved, things get worse. And so the government has come in and has destroyed the black community, and has destroyed, just like they have the Indian reservations or the Indian people.
And you're absolutely right. But what I've noticed is that I can understand the secular blacks who don't believe in God, right? But there are blacks who are pretending to believe in God, like T.D. Jakes and others, and the members of his church, and Oprah and all those people. They pretend to believe in God, But even they are going along with evil as though it's good. Even TDJ said that he something like, I'm not quoting him exactly because I forgot. He had to rethink if homosexuality is wrong or not. How can you be a preacher and you have to rethink that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so it's like with the George Floyd statue, black unemployed drug addict with a criminal record. You don't hear TD Jakes or these black Christians speaking out against that either. They're going along with it. You know, even when I was in a father state, right, and I was doing things that were wrong, I still had a limit. And I
Right.
knew that was wrong. I just didn't know how to overcome it at the time. I didn't know you had to return to God and all that, right? But I had a limit. But blacks today don't seem to have a limit. And that includes the black preacher, the black congregation, and the non-religious blacks. They're all in the same bucket.
Right. Well, you know what, from one generation to the other, it just devolves. And that's exactly what happens, you know, just the same as if when one generation of parents becomes unfaithful in the church and just, you know, actually just goes through the motions and are just go to church only, but they don't live Christianity. Well, the children can see it. And the children, they say, you know, I'm not going to go make the pretense of going to church if I'm not going to live it. And so they don't even go. And there's the same thing going on here. It just continues to devolve. If people are not dedicated to Jesus Christ, then the next generation, they see that. Your children can see through you. They can see what it's about. But now the children growing up now have no fathers in the home, as you know.
Yeah.
No fathers in the home, no one to teach them. They have people who are on the government dole completely. Just like in San Francisco now, they're having this. They have a huge tent community, and they want something like $53 million a year to pay for it. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop, because when people see the free things handed out, they just pile on, and pretty soon morality just disappears, and the work ethic absolutely is dissipated in our nation.
Yeah.
I mean, we just don't even have a work ethic any longer.
And you're right about being a good example as a Christian. I was counseling with a young man yesterday. He had been referred by his sister and brother-in-law to me for counseling. And I was telling him that he needed to return to God after we talked. So he was going through a lot. And he said something like, well, I'm not into that Christian thing. I don't believe in God. And later I found out that he said he used to go to church with his mother, I believe. But they used to sing about God, pray about God, but they didn't live it. And so as a young man, he just decided he wasn't going to be no Christian because it wasn't a good example for him anyway. So the parents wasn't a good example, and the other Christians wasn't a good example, so he decided not to be a Christian. And I see that a lot in the millennial population, a lot of atheists because the parents have failed them.
Right, and not only that, but now we have in the government school system, God is the only thing you can't even mention.
Yeah.
You can't even talk about God hardly. I mean, I have seen, even in the school system where I am, I've seen posters that have the Pledge of Allegiance that have erased, you know what, 2 words? Under God.
Yeah.
Under God. They erase. It's like you're reading the pledge, and then under God's not on the chart. I mean, they're so afraid. So we've kicked God out of the classroom. We've expelled God from the school system. We kick him out of the town square. We kick him out of the public square. We kick him out of our homes, and we get involved in all kinds of sinful activity. And then we wonder, you know, why our children. But in the government school system, particularly, nothing about God. We've had one after the other concept or a theory that is floated in the school system, such as whether it be values clarification, you know, which tells us there's nothing right, there's nothing wrong. Evolutions continue to be taught. Those things continue to be taught, but you cannot talk about God and the morality. It's interesting that our founding fathers recognized that our nation was founded upon the concept of God.
Yeah.
That they called it a Christian nation. They were the ones who said that. And the reason was not because it was a theocracy, not because they wanted church and state to be joined together, but because the principles of natural law and the God-given principles of the Bible are those upon which our country was founded.
That is so true. You know, there's this black gal that is with the Olympian, and
Yes.
she was, they were getting ready to do the Pledge of Allegiance thing, and
Right.
she turned her back, and then she put up stupid shirt that said black activist or something like that. I was thinking about that this morning, and so I was wondering, why don't the head of the Olympian, whoever in charge of that, tell that black girl, who looked awful, by the way, why don't they tell her within, if you're not committed to America, you don't like the Pledge of Allegiance, you don't like our rule, then you're off the team. Get out of here.
Yeah.
Throw her off and be done with her. Why do they let a nothing like that dictate what's going to happen on the Olympian team and concerning America? This girl is nothing, nobody, just a fat black girl with no value. Why are they letting one black person do that rather than kicking her off?
Well, I tell you what, that's inherent weakness. We have not stood up for the principles of America. Here's something else interesting. How could she come to a place where she hates America? Was it too much welfare that was given to her? I don't know her personal story, but frequently it's a lot of welfare, too much money given to her, too many opportunities to make an Olympic team. You know, they don't have a Black Olympic team. They have a mixed Olympic team. What opportunities did she lack? She's there in the public eye. She's on television, and yet she's an oppressed person.
In all honesty, I wouldn't care about why she's doing it. She's on my team. She agreed to follow my rules, pledge allegiance to my country. If she decides I don't want to do that, then she's out. I don't care if she's been on. I don't care if her mama on drugs, her daddy on drugs. I don't care. She's out. You don't get to do that against America.
Oh, I mean, that's right. I agree with you. They ought to just absolutely no. You know, just like baseball and football. You know, the ratings of football and the ratings of baseball professionally have gone so far down.
Yep.
And they just continue to cave in to these activists who don't know anything. All they've done is grow up throwing the baseball or football.
Right. Yep.
They don't know anything about the history of the country, and they get involved in these political Marxist movements, and they think there's something. And so then we listen to them. We ought to just tell them, no, you're done.
Right. I wouldn't even tolerate it. No, okay, you're fired.
Baseball field, say, you know what? You're not playing baseball anymore. You're out of here. And then the next person who wants to stand up and do it, they might think twice about doing it.
Yes, yeah. I do what the great white hope would do. You're fired.
Yes, sir.
Bill, can you hold for me?
Sure, that'd be great.
All right, I got to take a break. We got to get to your Super Chats and D-Lives in a minute here. I'm talking with Bill Lockwood, one of the smartest white men on this side of heaven with no fear. And you can find Bill at American Liberty with Bill Lockwood. He also have writing for the Bible brand. As I said, American Liberty with Bill Lockwood as well. That's his YouTube channel. Bill, anything else you want to put out there? Because I want the people to check you out because you're doing amazing work.
Well, thank you for that, Jesse.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, those are two YouTube channels. Yeah, American Liberty with Bill Lockwood, and also then Writing for the Bible brand. And that's a short Bible lesson, which I apply it to what's happening in America. So those are two YouTube channels they can subscribe to. And then the website is the same, American Liberty with BillLockwood.com. And then people can donate if they wish to there.
And I want to encourage you folks to check it out. All right, make sure you go there and check it out and support Bill Lockwood. Bill, I've heard over the years white Republicans say that if black people were to stand up, we could save America because the blacks are on the plantation, of the Democratic Party, right? And so they have been saying, if black people stand up, we can change America for the good. But the reality is most black people are not going to stand up. Right. They are addicted to evil. They're addicted to the Democratic Party, and they hate white people. Why, instead of believing in God, and so it's like a false hope in the blacks rather than a hope in God, faith in God.
Right.
Why don't white people realize they can't wait around for the blacks, because the blacks are clear, and not all but most, are
Yeah.
clearly on the side of evil, and I don't see any turning around in a generation soon, right? And
Right.
so why don't whites realize that they can't sit around and lose their country waiting on black people to help?
You know, I think a lot of people are very, very naive when it comes to what really is going to take to save America. You know, just as an illustration, I've talked about the ability of the state of Texas or other states to secede from the Union, but based upon God-given abilities or God-given rights and the ability that we have to live under God-given rights and not to live under a dictatorship from out of Washington, D.C. And you know, we have a right to do that. I mean, instead of implementing homosexual laws in our state, instead of implementing anti-God legislation, instead of implementing Obamacare, which is the continuing to spread wealth, instead of implementing abortion, we have a right before God to have a society that does not do that and secede. But some of them said, "Oh no, we don't have the right to do that." And I had one legislator tell me, he said, "Well, America needs Texas, you know, so we don't need to be seceding or anything like that, or even thinking about that." I thought, well, you know, we're naive.
Yeah.
I think that the point is that we're so naive, thinking that, okay, just like the last election, we think, okay, let's just get out there and vote. That is naive. We're not in a voting situation any longer. We're in a war.
Yes.
And this is a war for the soul of America.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be solved by converting 2 or 3 black people to republicanism. It's only going to be solved by changing the hearts of individuals.
Yes.
And to save our country, then it's going to take more than simply getting a few more voters. All the voters in the world are not going to do any good if we don't have integrity of elections, which we don't have. And we found that out with the Trump election, or when Trump was not elected, Biden election last fall. We don't have integrity of elections any longer. It's a bigger issue than simply getting a few more blacks involved in the Republican Party. I don't understand why people cannot see the real issue is, however, that it's the evil in people's hearts. We need to convert people and get this country back to God, and individuals converted and repent instead of simply trying to paper over our problems.
Can you be a son or a daughter of Satan, meaning not believing God, and have a little bit of morals? Or if Satan your daddy, you have no morals? And the reason I ask, because I'm looking at these black churches and white ones, but predominantly black ones. Even the preacher from the pulpit all the way down through the congregation, they are standing against America. They are standing against white people, but yet they pretend to believe in God. And so I was wondering, since they read the Bible, they quote the Bible, they go to church, they hoop and holler, and they don't stand up for righteousness at all, even though they're singing about God, they don't even have a little bit of morals. They just don't have any.
Yeah.
Because look like
Well,
if you have a little bit of moral value, you know, well, this is wrong. I may be a sinner, but I know that's wrong, right? Some things are just obviously wrong, but most of the blacks don't seem to know that.
You know what, Jesse? Here's something that's happened to the black community, and it happens to a lot of different peoples, and that is they become so blinded by their own race, and they think that, you know, for example, just let me reach back for a moment. Back in the 1920s, there was a man by the name of Walter Rauschenbusch who taught the social gospel, and his deal was that the Bible should be about changing the dynamics in America, changing the politics and changing the social system. It was social justice, really, was called the social gospel. And it caused people to think more along in lines of socialism and communism than they did in Jesus Christ. And we need to spread the wealth around instead of simply individual liberty before God. And so what's happened in the black community is exactly that. That is, they're seeing more of their color and blackness, and they think the biggest problem in America is some kind of racism. And they're all about that. They're not about converting people to Christ. I know preachers, black preachers, who are interested in racism much more than in converting non-Christians into Christ. They're not interested in that. They're interested in supposed racism that's going on. And they're all about that, but they're not about converting souls to Jesus Christ. And that's what they're about. It's all about race. It's all about race to them.
And so they're so rooted in the race issue, that so-called issue, because it's not a real issue anyway. But they're so into that they don't know abortion is wrong. They don't know radical homosexuality or radical lesbianism is wrong. They don't know hating your fellow man is wrong. Are they so into the race thing that they don't recognize all this other junk as being wrong?
That's right. They don't, at least they don't count it. They don't weigh it as heavy as racism. This is interesting to think about. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, Paul speaks about those who were slaves, and he even says, even if you have a chance to be free, don't worry about it. In other words, there's something more important than simply freeing yourself from slavery. Now, we don't have slavery in America.
Right.
But he said, Paul was about, in Christ, you need to be more interested about the spiritual portion of a man and being one in Jesus Christ than whether you're a slave or free. He says, even if you're a slave, that's 1 Corinthians 7:19. Don't even worry about it.
Yeah.
But see, we are worried about whether a person rejects me or accepts me, and we assume immediately without proof that it's racial, it has something to do with someone's race. And so all this is Satan is blinding the minds of preachers as well as people that call themselves Christians. That's what's happening. Satan himself, yeah.
To the point that in this country, in the inner cities, black on black crimes just out of control. They don't even care about their own people.
No.
Black on black crime out of control. Black people killing white people. There was a shooting up in Portland, and I have the story coming up, where according to the report, the police killed some guy, right?
Yeah.
And the radicals went protesting, going after the cops. And so the head of the cop department came and said, "Hey, don't worry. It was a white man that got shot."
I saw that.
You saw that? And so that when they found out, and he said, no other person was hurt. It was a white man that got shot. And they backed off.
That shows you what's moving in this country is communism, and that alone. Marxism, communism divides people along racial lines. And so we're all interested only in race. That's all we want to see. That's all. And so we've colored ourselves in that direction. But those who are particularly prone to it are the blacks, the minorities in this country. The same thing with Hispanics. If you're a minority in this country, you're prone to be brainwashed to think that this is what it's all about. And to recognize or to think that everything's about your race, everyth's about, and so you're on the bottom side of everything, and everything that's happened that you don't like in life is because that you're a black person or you're a Hispanic person. And so, and all that's caused by those who are Caucasians. This is communism. This is classic communism, Marxism, to divide people along these lines. This neo-Marxism is what it is.
In New York, Times Square, I remember when, I used to go to New York a lot to do different shows over there, to appear on shows. Times Square was beautiful. Bunch of folks from everywhere. And you had a sense of being safe in that area. Now the blacks are out there shooting in Times Square in the daylight, broad daylight. I don't hear any criticism about it from the black preachers or anyone, and really not from the white people either. They're just letting this happen. You're letting these blacks out of prisons and jails, and they're robbing, raping, and killing in public, and there's nothing being said or done. Yeah,
and you know what? The only thing that is said is by Joe Biden or the administration, who says the problem is firearms. Like as if America is so stupid as to not be able to see that it's a lack of moral integrity and a lack of moral character that is causing the crime in our cities. That's what's happening. Here's another interesting thing. In Chicago, we've talked about Chicago. They have a black mayor. They have black city council members. They have black school board members. during Obama's presidency, they had a black president, and yet all of that, they created so many black thugs in Chicago. You can't tell me that it has to do with white racism or white nationalism.
Yeah.
Everything was black, and yet they have all these black thugs running around. Black president, black mayor, black city council members, black school board members. Everyone's black, and yet the blacks are out there angrier than ever before. It has nothing to do with whites.
Well, one last thing, Bill, I want to squeeze in some calls for you, if you don't mind.
No, that's great.
Oh, I forgot my thought. They wanted to, the blacks wanted to defund the police departments, right? And so
Right.
they defunded the police department, the Democratic Party right along with it, the media pushing it
Yeah.
to defund the police. And now crime is going through the roof because of the blacks.
Right.
And now the Democrats are trying to blame it on, because the election's coming up in another year, they're trying to blame it on the Republicans.
Right.
And
This
it's
is
the
crazy.
Republicans that wanted to defund. That's not true. Will the people fall for that lie?
Well, they've fallen for a lot of lies, and I guess the Democrats are counting on the fact that the American people are so stupid that they will continue to fall for another lie. And here's something interesting. Adolf Hitler even stated, he says, when we want to take a country for totalitarianism, the problem is not that we tell lies, and this is something that Saul Alinsky taught also. He says, we tell lies, but we tell too little of a lie. What we need to do is to tell the gigantic lie, tell the big lie, the lie that is seemingly too big and too obvious a lie. We tell that lie. He says, and the reason Saul Alinsky said to do that is because even when people come to the truth on it and recognize it as a lie, the traces of that lie still remain. And so if they continue to lie, saying it's about white nationalism, President Biden says it's all about white nationalism. They just continue to lie on that. And what happens is, even if people come to the senses, they kind of have, well, I've heard that white nationalism so much, I kind of got to watch for that,
Yeah.
And that's how it happens.
Amazing. What does Independence Day mean to you?
Independence Day means that we have the freest country, as was founded at least, the freest country in the history of the world, and it was the first time in the history of mankind that we founded the country upon biblical principles: God, life, liberty, and property. This was the first time we were able to do it. That's why I consider the Independence Day to be a great day in America, simply because it's the first time in history we were able to do that. All other countries, all other cultures were founded upon different principles, but Independence Day recognizes the fact that our founders were so Christian oriented that they wanted a country that was founded upon God and life, liberty, and property, and limited government, that you might enjoy what God gave you. That's what Independence Day means to me.
And I want to make it clear to the folks, we're not talking about that stupid fake Juneteenth Day, because they're trying to call that independent.
That's right.
We're not talking about that, folks. We're talking about
That's
the 4th of July. I started White History Month, as I said, in July. I've noticed that in my country, they have Black history, women history, homosexual history month, Asian, Mexican, everything but white history. And I think that white history is more important than any of those other months. And I noticed that whenever I mentioned that we are now celebrating White History Month to a white audience, a Black audience rejects it because they hate white people. But white people seem nervous about celebrating White History Month. Why is that?
Oh, I think you're right about that, because, we're all taught to goose step to the fact that, it's the minorities that need to be celebrated and not the majority culture. We've got to celebrate the minority culture, and that we have to do that. That's the doctrinaire of American culture and schools and government schools today. We've taught that, whether it be Islam, whether it be the Vietnamese, or whether it be Blacks, or whether it be Hispanics. We have to celebrate minority culture. And when you talk about the majority culture, there's like, that just rubs us the wrong way. And it's like, oh, what are we doing? And you know, it's like rubbing the hair on the wrong way on the dog. It's like, that's you know.
But white history is more important than any other of these so-called other history because, again, if it wasn't for white people, there would be no America. It'd be a mess.
You know what? Back in Philadelphia several years ago, this may still go on. I don't know what happens now, but this happened several years ago when the guides would take people through Constitution Hall and they would talk about the founding fathers on the pictures. And they would, you know, talk about, you know, they have all the founding fathers there, those that signed the Declaration of Independence and have those paintings that were there. The guides would stop and say, I ask all the school children, what do you all recognize about the picture? And they might say, well, he's wearing a funny hat, or he's, you know, he has a funny looking hairdo or whatever. The guide would stop and say, no, they're all white men. And let's go on the next one. In other words, what are they were trying to create, and this is our government trying to create this white black divide and cause people to think, oh, that's terrible, you know, and say that. And that's been taught for years and years and years. And the children that were in those schools, they're now adults, they're now in government. And this is motivating their policy making.
Yeah, it's awful that they are rewriting history in our country.
It is.
That in Tulsa, Oklahoma, there was a fight between a white group and a black group, right? And 100 years has been called a riot. And now that they are rewriting history because they want reparations and stuff like that, they're calling it a black massacre. They've changed the word to make people feel like it was really horrible. It was a massacre. And then as soon as you fall for it, we want reparation. It's all about the money. Right.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, we do that. We change it all up, history, and we relabel things in order to create impressions. So we might go back. You know, we might talk about the Sand Creek massacre where Custer came in, you know, and killed Cheyenne Indians in Oklahoma. But when Custer and all of his group were killed, they don't call it the Custer massacre. They call it the Custer battle. You know, he went in there fighting, but they got all killed. We'd like to relabel things in order to create impressions.
Amazing. Let me go to Mays. Your friend Mays out of
I know Mays.
out of Dayton, Ohio. Mays, you're on with Bill Lockwood. Thanks for calling.
Hello, Lockwood.
Hello, Miss Mays. How are you?
It's mighty strange to me. You always talk about Hitler's history and the thing Hitler did.
Oh, yeah.
But some of the stuff was awful. I have a Hitler stamp, too, by the way. And he looks just like you all. And all of the stuff he did in history, you wanted to talk about that history. But when it comes to American history, y'all don't want to have no conversation about it. It's not true. It's everything that people live and know is not true from the talking points that y'all have, from the ill and uninformed. So what's wrong with telling the real? Because when Bonnie and Clyde used to ride in Oklahoma and all the backwoods and all of the stuff that they used to do, didn't they do some terrible things?
Bonnie and Clyde, they did. It was awful.
Oh, yes. But some people don't know that Bonnie and Clyde were some gangsters.
Yeah. Well, Bonnie and Clyde were terrible.
That's what I'm saying. History is history. Regardless of how it's told, what it is, you should just go on and let it be. And then when you talk about the flag and the Bible, but you never talk about the law of God. That's where you leave it out. So if that would have been taught in the classroom, half of the stuff that you see now probably wouldn't be going on.
Well, that's what Bill said. He said if...
I agree with you on that. That's the first time I've agreed with you ever.
Hold on, Mace. Listen to Bill. Hold on.
Okay.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, Mace, listen, I appreciate that. If we taught the laws of God in the classroom, I think you're exactly right. We would have a different country, a different culture. I appreciate that, and I agree with you.
And so when you talk about the Bible, what are you having now? Fighting and everything else going on in the Bible. So how you going to sit up and talk about one group of people when people look like you doing the same thing, but you won't admit that? And then when you talk about a law, and Jesse don't even have a right to vote, do we? Just like you have.
I don't have a right to vote.
When you get him the same way that you have to vote as a Caucasian man, then you're going to be doing something.
What does she mean I don't have a right to vote? I do have a right to vote.
He got a right.
Hold on, man. We got to find out what you mean by that. What does she mean I don't have a right to vote?
I'm not quite sure what she means that you don't have a right to vote.
Jesse got the Voting Right Act. You don't have one, do you, as a Caucasian man?
You know what?
You can just vote. You don't have to
Hold on, man.
They got to vote.
I got Mace
You
on
know what?
hold. Go ahead, Bill.
You know what, Mays? Here's what the Bible teaches, that we're all one man in Christ Jesus. There can be neither Jew nor Greek, bond or free, slave or free. We're all one man in Christ Jesus. So there's no need for us to say, as a white man, as a black person, you white people, and you Caucasian people, there's no need for that. I mean, we're supposed to be all one man in Christ.
Do you accept that, Mace?
Hey,
Mace
no,
didn't even
no.
hear. Mace, thanks for your call. Bill, do you have to run or can you hang on for a minute?
I can hang on. That'd be great. Whatever you'd like for me to do. That'd be
Oh,
wonderful.
okay. I'm going to
Yeah.
hold Bill over for, I got to take a break. 2 more hours to go. Back in a moment. I'm holding Bill Lockwood over, one of the smartest white men on this side of heaven, and I'm fortunate to have him as a friend. You can check out Bill Lockwood at American Liberty with Bill Lockwood. He is a writer, radio host, and preacher at Wichita Falls, Texas there. Preacher at Our Park Church of Christ. He's also a school teacher. Bill, thank you for staying over.
You bet. I'm happy to do so. It's great to be with you, Jesse.
You too, man. We're making history here. I got to ask this. It's clear to me that our battle is a spiritual battle, warfare between good and evil. Has
Right.
nothing to do with color, nothing to do with male or female.
Right.
And they have brought radical homosexuality and lesbian forward as though it's a norm. Is
Right.
that a sign of the end times?
It's a sign of end times for America. I don't know about the end times of the world or that Christ will come back because we're simply repeating what Sodom and Gomorrah did, and he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of the plain for this very crime. And so people need to understand that. People need to recognize that. That's what the Old Testament teaches in Genesis 19. That's what Jude tells us in the book of Jude, verse 12. And that was because of their homosexual crime. They had gone after, as it put in Jude, strange flesh, and that was their crime. So that's the end. It will be the end of America. It will spell the end of America.
When you say the end, do you mean America will disappear, or will all the noble people of America have to leave or something?
Well, I don't know how all of it's going to transpire as far as the people that are Christians and people want to stand for right. However, I think as far as a free country that we recognize as America, it cannot last going against what God has taught pertaining to the issue of homosexuality and pertaining to idolatry and pertaining to passing our children through the fire in abortion. We cannot last as a nation with God's blessing. So I don't know whether that means we're going to split up, whether we'll have civil war and strife within the country, which it may be, which it looks like it's already happening in that regard, or whether it means that a foreign nation will dominate us and will start eradicating Christianity, such as China, which they do already over there. I don't know exactly what it will look like, but as far as the America that we have known and loved, it will be the end of it because we have not been able to stand up and stop this hedonism and this wickedness that's taking place in our country.
I noticed that there's an ad. I don't know if it's real or not. It's hard for me to believe that it's real, but I believe that I think it is. A friend sent it to me, and it says that the NFL is homosexual now. NFL is lesbian. NFL is all this junk. I want to play that for you. Would Bill be able to see it if we play it? Oh, I can't play it for you. You won't be able to see it. But the NFL is now promoting homosexuality and all that as being the NFL now.
Right. I didn't know that, but I'm not surprised. The NFL has, it's interesting to me that they have all these muscle-bound men, but they are not man enough to stand up for a moral code that is very clear in the Bible and very clear in natural law.
Yeah.
And they cannot stand up for what most of them probably know is right against that which is wrong, because perhaps their job, because the money they make, whatever it may be. But the NFL itself has absolutely gone woke.
No. The women are complaining that they don't want men with dresses on who think that they're women in their sport, in the women's sport. But to me, what is wrong with that? If the women want women in men's sport, they think that's fine. Why can't they have men, even if they are in a dress? Why can't they have men in their sport?
You know, that's a good point, actually. This goes back to the feminist idea that has been pushed in America since the 1960s, has been furthered and sponsored by the United Nations, and that is this radical feminist ideology, which is designed by its nature to destroy, once again, the nuclear family, or the family as we know it, biblical family, just the same as Black Lives Matter has done. So feminism has also been attacking American values. And so your point is well taken.
Yeah.
But we want to act like there's no difference and that everybody's the same in the sense that in all senses whatsoever. And that's ridiculous. And people, by the way, people in other countries see it and they say, you know, that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. They don't care about our absolute woke politics.
Yeah.
They have a little bit more common sense than to say, oh, okay, we're going to follow the radical Marxist professors at school and say that there's no difference between a man and a woman and there's no biological difference either. It's just like, that's nuts.
As the old people used to say, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So
Yes.
if they want to put women in men's sport, they might well put the men in the women's sport, and then everything will be the same.
And I guess they're doing that. And all the men has to do is say, you know, okay, I'm a transgender. And so now you have men who are in the weightlifting competitions who are they have become transgenders now and identify as a woman.
Yeah.
And so therefore they're blowing the records off of the weightlifting and the women are not able to compete. So it's a destruction
Nice.
of sports.
Yeah. You know, Mays is impossible to communicate with, dialogue with, right? Because she doesn't stop with her mouth open. And I wanted her to talk to you too about this so-called, well, she made the point where Jesse doesn't have the same right as you have to vote, meaning you, right? Yeah. And she was referring to this something called Voter Rights Act or something like that. I never even think about that. It doesn't even cross my mind. I know I can vote. I'm fine.
Yeah.
What do you know about the Voter Rights Act or something like that?
Well, you know what, the voting, we've been able to vote in this country, blacks and whites, everybody's been able to vote. But what the Democrats are trying to push now, and they're acting as if the blacks are still somehow suppressed in their vote, is they want to do away with the ID. They don't want you to, the Democrats do not want you to have to show an ID card. They don't want you to identify who you are. They want to be able to go out and harvest ballots. They don't want integrity of elections, and they paint it as if, well, somehow the blacks are suppressed and they're not able to go vote. That's nonsense.
Yeah. And the blacks are going along with it, agreeing with the Democrats that they're so dumb and lazy, they can't get an ID. The blacks are okay with it. I'm like, what the?
Yeah, that's ridiculous. I mean, so all the Democrats do all the time is every issue, they sketch it as a black-white issue,
yeah.
And therefore you get the blacks on board with it. So you have 13% of America, I think that's what we have as far as blacks in America, so they have 13% of America already on board with their program if they sketch it in terms of black versus white.
Yeah.
And so that's what they do on everything. So the healthcare thing by Obama was that Joe Biden now it's gotten so radical. Joe Biden's lawyers in the Supreme Court argued that they wanted to have reparations, or actually I should say farm subsidies to black farmers and not whites.
Yeah.
That's like, what? I mean, they're openly racist and they're legislating it that way, and no one seems to call their hand on it. I was like, can you imagine if we would say we're going to give money only to white farmers and no blacks, or we're going to give money only to white people for this but no blacks? That's nuts. But this is open racism or open hate is what's going on in America.
Yeah, it is. Pablo from Houston, Texas, has an amazing question for you, Bill. I'll let you take that. Pablo, Thank you for calling, and thanks for holding your on with Bill Lockwood.
Hey there, Jesse. Hey there, Bill.
Hey.
Hey, Pablo, how are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you, gentlemen?
All is
Good.
well.
Good. So my question was, is it worth it to try to preserve America from destruction? But what I mean by this, if I can elaborate a little bit, is I'm a Christian, proud Christian, and a missionary as well. And my understanding of the world is obviously, the things the Democrats are doing and all these children of Satan are doing really is totally corrupt and destroying this great country that's the United States. But my understanding is that this earth, not alone America, but this whole earth has an expiration date. I believe it. My understanding is at some point Christ will come back. There'll be a new heaven, new earth. So my question is it really worth it trying to preserve America and the world from this corruption, or should we really focus on trying to find a few people out there who are willing to come out of this fallen state so that when Christ comes back, they'll be good?
You know what, Pablo? I think that question is well taken, actually. And what we really need to be about is saving souls. That's correct. I believe that. And if that's not our first priority, then I think that our priorities are askew. Just in saving America, the only reason that I want to talk about that and that I'm interested in is because I live here and I don't want to see myself or my children or my grandchildren suffer under such totalitarian regimes. But your point is absolutely, I think, on target, and that is, if we're not about saving souls, and we support missionaries, as you probably do also, in other countries, and they're going to be sending missionaries to the United States because they have people who are walking, for example, in South Africa, they walk without shoes for a day to hear the gospel preached. And we don't have anything like that, of course, in America. So they're hungry for it over in other countries. And we need to be about that, I think, primarily. And I think you're right about that.
So you believe it's worth it to try to save America?
Well, I do, just only because and I don't know that first of all, I don't know that the entire can be saved. I don't necessarily believe that. But I do believe that we can have pockets of resistance and pockets of freedom wherein people may be able to live in a free country. Because even though we need to be saving souls, as Pablo points out, and that's our primary goal, that should be our primary goal, I still have to live in a community, I still have to live in a society, and it's not very practical for me to jump on a plane and say, I'm out of here, I'm going to Belize, and I'm taking my family and everybody I know with me. That's pretty difficult, but that's my understanding of it. So I think, as far as preserving what I have and being able to maintain any kind of freedom, I'm going to push for that, just the same as if I was in the Hanoi Hilton and I knew I'm going to be in the Hanoi Hilton the rest of my life. I would like to press for a little bit of freedom and a modicum of freedom that I might be able to study the Bible and be able to do what I need to do. But if we can go and if we need to go and evangelize other peoples, we need to do that. And that should be number one priority. I think you're right about that. And this earth is not going to last. You're right. 2 Peter chapter 3 says it's going to be on fire. So that's right.
Thank you, Pablo.
Jesse, I want to know your answer too.
About, is it worth to save America?
Yeah.
I believe so. I think that greater is he that's in me than he that's in the world. And if people truly love God with all their heart, soul, and might, America was a gift, or is a gift, from God. And I think that we have true Christians, those who've truly been born again, have it in them to save this country and not be afraid of the children of the lie, because they don't have God. They have Satan as their God, but they have no real courage. They have no love. And perfect love, which is from God, will defeat evil. And so I'm fighting until whatever happened. I'm not giving up.
Yes, actually, an interesting thing that I also wanted to mention is that I've noticed that after I really was born again,
yes,
I can't help but speak the truth.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm in an Uber driver, and then it's a black Uber driver. He's complaining about racism. I can't help just to say, racism isn't real, and just with no anger,
Yeah.
So I guess we do preserve this earth also at work. Just naturally, this truth comes out. So I think there is a preservation, but it was good to hear Bill's answer than your answer. So I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah. Pablo, I would say this, that I do believe our primary goal should be to save souls, as I think you believe as well. But a byproduct of that is the community and the salvation, not in the soul sense, but saving our communities and saving our nation. It's only a byproduct of real salvation in Christ.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's true. Because I noticed, Bill, once the souls turn back to God, then they have the courage to stand up for everything else. They stand against evil, stand up for what is right. Amazing, Pablo. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Guys. Take care.
So, you too, man. Thanks for calling. Bill, Hake is here from the HakeReport.com.
Yes,
you know who that is?
James Hake, I do. I've met James Hake. What a great man.
Yeah. So he was typing me some things because he's on fire about this conversation. Okay. And so I asked him to come into the studio, and he's here. James Hake from the Hake Report. He's also one of my experts.
He is. You know what? James is just a great Christian man. You know what? I'm looking forward to visiting with James. I haven't been able to see him in a long time, so this would be great.
So what do you want to say?
I forget because I can't see what I wrote.
Oh, you wrote, "Saving America is saving souls. We aren't the ones doing the saving, though."
Oh, yeah. I think that this thing about saving America,
you want to say hi to Bill?
Hey, Bill. Nice to see you.
How are you, James?
He doesn't see me, though.
Oh.
But I think saving America is saving souls because we're protecting children from being brought up to believe in this fake racism thing and believe in this fake LGBTQ thing that is doing a lot of saving of the souls. But the stuff that we're doing, like the human beings aren't the ones who are doing the saving of souls. We can tell the truth, but God's the one who saves them.
Right. Well, no one denies that it's God who saves individuals, but we are providing the means and by the gospel means to do it. And it is our business to go out and preach the gospel. And as people are obedient to the gospel and become Christians, then I do believe a byproduct is the salvation of America. But I guess my main point is we're not going to be able to save our country in the sense of preserving freedom if we don't have people turning to Christ.
Yeah.
And so however we want to word it, that's right. People need to turn to Christ.
Amazing. Nice. Was that you, James?
Thank you.
James is a little homemade Christian.
I've never heard that phraseology before.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, he is. He's amazing. Who is this on TuneIn? Corey A. is a first-time caller out of Sweetport. And Joel would call it Sweetenport or something like that. Out of Sweetport, Louisiana. Corey, you're on with Bill Lockwood. Corey, you're on with Bill Lockwood. Go ahead.
Hey, Corey.
All right, awesome. How you doing, Jesse? How you doing, Bill?
All is well.
Good to hear from you.
All right. Awesome. Yeah, it's good to hear from you guys, too. So my question was, I heard you guys talking about the policy where they're giving black farmers money and not white farmers, which, that's racist, just, off principle. But there were policies in America's past, like the Homestead Act, the GI Bill, some people say redlining, even like Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society, where they gave welfare to the community and took the black father out of the home. Do you think maybe some of these practices now are making up for those discrepancies in the past? And do you still think it's wrong if they're trying to undo the past by giving to disenfranchised black Americans?
Well, first of all, just the old adage, two wrongs don't make a right. If there have been wrongs in the past, and no doubt that wrongs have been done in the past to black community, what we're doing, is we're actually in the assumption here is that we're lumping all blacks together. So if your grandfather was wronged by a policy, then you're not. First of all, I had nothing to do with that. because we're lumping me with all whites and lumping you with all blacks, and so I would have nothing to do with that. Number two, you have probably more benefits now than any generation of Americans, and so I have a hard time seeing how we can come along now and actually tilt directions on one thing to make up for something that happened years ago. I mean, if you want to go back to history, we go back further in history where every person, every class of people have been wrong somehow. I mean, my family had been wronged, your family has been wronged. I mean, where does it ever end? And anyway, I don't see how that a government policy that tilts in one direction will make up for something that happened in history. If we stop doing what's wrong, that's what we need to do.
And plus, we have already done good by the blacks. We ended slavery. And it was the Arabs who went to Africa and got the blacks from other black people. So we have ended slavery. Black people, we have given them everything they have asked for: affirmative action, welfare. We let them live in the white communities. We let them go to the white schools. We've given them free stuff, and they only got worse rather than getting better. How much more we can give them? And none of them know anything about slavery anyway. They're not.
Well,
it's not because of, and they're not disenfranchised. They have been turned away from God, but they're not disenfranchised. All those are just made up words.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the main problem in the black community is a lack of morality, and first and foremost, people do not want to follow Christ any longer.
Right.
But I also think one of the problems with the black community is we want a status like Native Americans, and we also see what happened to the Jews during the Holocaust, and we relate our situation here in America to them. So just like they have lots of monuments and things in Germany and recognition sites, black people want to be recognized more, but I do believe that we should go to Christ first before all of that. And I don't see it happening soon here in America.
Amazing.
No, I agree with Courier on that. And this happened, of course, in the black community pretty heavily, but also just across America. We're seeing the same thing in every community where people are really not turning to God. But back on the reparation type question, Courier, something else to think about. In the Old Testament law, if I had violated stolen someone's property, and I was convicted of that crime, then I was required to pay that back and to pay it back with reparation. But I never seen anything such as, well, later on, my great-grandchildren are going to be having to pay back to the great-grandchildren of the family that I had wronged back in the day, that now all of a sudden they're going to have to make some payments to this family when no one is a principal in the crime at all. So I do agree in reparation as far as the penalties given from a person who's committed the crime to the person who had been convicted, who had been subjected to the crime. But as far as generations that flow following, I don't understand how reparations would even have to do with it.
Yeah. Courier, thank you for your call, buddy. I appreciate it. Call me again, all right?
Courier.
Hey, man, I appreciate you, too. Like I said, I'm a 29-year-old black man from Shreveport, Louisiana, and I like everything you got to say, brother. Keep doing the good work.
Courier, I was going to tell you, I used to preach in Marshall, Texas. You know where Marshall is?
Yeah, I go there all the time for work.
Well, I used to preach there at Eastern Hills Church of Christ right there in Marshall, and have a lot of good friends in Marshall, Texas. Been to Shreveport many times, so I know your country.
All right, man. Thank you so much. I'll have to check it out, man.
Yeah, okay, good.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it, buddy.
All right, thank you.
All right. I've been to Shreveport, too. They have good gumbo. Bill, one last thing that I got to let you go. I noticed that since they have defunded the police and they have taken away bail bonds and all that, and they're letting these blacks out of prisons and jails, that the blacks are going out of control. They're robbing and stealing and raping and fighting in airports and restaurants. And there was a woman who stopped at a gas station or something, got out of her car and didn't lock it. She just ran in. You can't do that anymore. A black guy allegedly stole her car while she was in there, and like he was waiting around to steal. What's wrong with the blacks that they're losing control? They have no sense of self-control.
You know, and I'm using this only as an illustration. It's just as a child in the home. If you have no boundaries in the home and you do not teach a child boundaries or respect for God, then as that child grows older, then children are naturally going to be inclined to search for boundaries. My children in the home, your children, everybody's children in the home, they search for the boundary. They want to know where the boundary line is. They don't ask it verbally. They push the envelope, so to speak, and they push to find the boundary. But if we make no boundaries and we continue to back up, then they continue to push and they continue to push. And that's the psychology of people. So if we have a gang, for example, in a school system, let's take from the movie several years ago, the John Travolta movie, let's say we have a gang called the T-Birds, and the T-Bird gang in the school, everybody else has to follow the rules, but the T-Bird gang does not have to follow the rules at all, and they don't have any boundaries whatsoever. Whatever they do, what are they going to do? They're going to push more, push more, push more. And pretty soon people are going to join the T-Bird gang and everybody's going to get into it because, hey, they don't have any boundaries. They don't have any rules, no regulations, and everybody's backing up. And pretty soon it's out of control, just as your family can get out of control. Children search for boundaries. People search for boundaries. And we refuse to give them boundaries, so we're refusing to give them the love of God. And when we refuse to give them boundaries by punishing that which is wrong and drawing the lines darkly and saying, this is the line you can't cross, they're going to continue to push. Yeah. And it's going to get worse.
Amazing. Bill Taylor, thank you so much for staying over, man. It was amazing.
I'm happy to visit with you, Jesse. You're just one of my best friends, and I just appreciate you and your stand for truth and stand for the Bible and all that you do.
Thank you. Tell the folks how to get your website, how to support what you're doing.
Well, the website, of course, is AmericanLibertyWithBillLockwood.com. And then the two YouTube channels are American Liberty with Bill Lockwood and also Writing for the Bible brand. And then the website, of course, I have links to the radio show. We do the radio show, and that's once a week out of Wichita Falls, Lubbock, and Abilene, AmericanLibertyWithBillLockwood.com. American Liberty with Bill Lockwood's radio show, yeah.
American Liberty with BillLockwood.com. Bill, I noticed that whatever y'all did today, the picture there is clear and everything is crisp and nice today. It worked out perfectly.
You know what? The Zoom, your staff sent me the Zoom link, and the Zoom is working great. This is really, really good. I really like it. I have a great picture of you. We're not jumbled up with trying to figure out how to get things looking better and sounding better.
It sounds great, too. So did you have sense enough to use the Zoom?
You want to know the truth of the matter? Yeah. My son and daughter-in-law are at their house now in Driftwood Springs, Texas area, which is in Driftwood, Texas, and they had to come in and help me do it.
I know what you mean. Happy 4th of July Independence Day, Bill. Thank you so much to you and the family, all right?
Yes, sir. Okay, Lord bless you, Jesse.
All right. Thank you, Bill. Bill Lockwood, folks. Bill Lockwood. Check him out, American Liberty with BillLockwood.com. Amazing. And don't forget to like, follow, tweet, subscribe, and share the Jesse Lee Peterson radio show, folks. We really appreciate it. We are at war. It is a spiritual battle for the soul of America. And it's going to take all of us to do it.